Hey, so I wanted to address something that I think is a real obstacle when it comes to Myers-Briggs profiling. And that is the Enneagram. So I haven't really talked about the Enneagram much on this channel, but the Enneagram is a different way of looking at personality. So the way that I think of it, Myers-Briggs is like a cognitive framework, a sort of, kind of like a hardwiring. It's like just a set of circuitry, input and output filters. And the Enneagram is a pattern of the ego. It's like an energy pattern in response to existential terror from a certain perspective. So basically, as the theory goes, we develop in response. We develop a sort of false personality in response to these different flavors of existential terror, our awareness of our fragility and ways in which we are, particularly averse to feeling vulnerable. So the way that this manifests and kind of the challenge here is that you can have people who are. I see these systems, by the way, as being very compatible. I think they are extremely useful. I don't think they're in any way conflicting with each other. I think they're two great tastes that taste great together, so to speak. So the challenge is you can have people who are the same Myers-Briggs type, but they're a different Enneagram type, and they will behave very, very differently. So, this is often the case when if you tell a layperson that this person and this person are the same Myers-Briggs type, where they'll be like, no way, then the whole thing is bunk. It doesn't make sense because they're not like each other. So, the people of different Enneagram types can behave dramatically different from each other, even if they're the same Myers-Briggs type. So they can be using essentially the same cognitive structure, the same, framework mentally, but they have a completely different emotional pull to do, to behave in completely different ways. So I highly recommend you look into the Enneagram if you're not familiar. One of the patterns, for example, that I think can often throw a monkey wrench in things when you're trying to figure out someone's type, it's Enneagram pattern 3. So there are 9. They're not hierarchical. So it's sort of almost arbitrary what the numbers are, but number 3, that pattern is basically the fear is that there is not an authentic self that's worthy of love. So what a 3 is kind of unconsciously compelled to do is to kind of create a false self and to seek praise, to seek accomplishment, things that they can be externally validated for. And that's kind of, they're all games that people try to play that essentially they can't win. And that's the game that they're trying to play. They're trying to be praised for something that's not really part of their authentic self. So 3s, the way that this would manifest, seeking fame, seeking, people who are, quote unquote attention whores, or people who can be just, driven to accomplish things to no end at any cost, basically. So this will be the case for this actually where this often screws people up, I think, specifically in Myers-Briggs, is that it can make intuitives appear more like sensors. So any Myers-Briggs type, I think there are some Enneagram types that are only going to be a certain subset of Myers-Briggs types and vice versa. But I think there are some Enneagram types that could be any Myers-Briggs type. And I think this is the case with Enneagram 3 from my observation. So where this can be particularly tricky is when an Enneagram 3 is an INFJ. And also to some extent when they're an ENFJ. So this is why, in my opinion, nobody can settle on Taylor Swift's type, because Taylor Swift is an INFJ Enneagram 3. So this is a combination that breaks stereotypes. So when most people think of an INFJ, they think of real deep thinker, someone who really strives for authenticity and truth. An Enneagram 3 has a very different stereotype. Enneagram 3s are constantly looking for external validation. Anything that you say about a Myers-Briggs type that is talking about behavior is going to be making a leap. So people of certain Myers-Briggs types can be more likely to behave in a certain way, but their Myers-Briggs type is not what makes them behave in any certain way. Whereas Enneagram is more, I think, correlated directly to behavior. So in the case of Taylor Swift was, she had wealthy parents who pushed her to be famous from the time she was a little kid. And it's not determined, to my knowledge, whether or not Enneagram type is inborn or it's something that develops in early childhood. But either way, I think she's pretty clearly an Enneagram 3. So that desire for external validation, I think, is what throws people off the trail of INFJ. But no, there's no consensus whatsoever on her type. I was actually going to do a in-depth video on Taylor Swift, but I just couldn't do it. I spent a good deal of time on it, and I don't know, I just couldn't watch that many videos of Taylor Swift. But at some point I will probably finish that. This happens also often with ENFJs. A lot of times people mistake ENFJs for ESFPs because they are Enneagram 3s. Again, Enneagram 3 will make intuitives more often look like sensors. So there are a million different ways that this manifests. If you want to get really good at profiling, then I think you really have to come to understand the Enneagram as well as Myers-Briggs. So that's it for now. Cheers.